Y'all, we back with another solo leveling arise video. So, as you know, the Cheyenne banner is about to leave in about 3 days and a few hours time from the recording of this video. And I figured, okay, well, what's the best way to kind of help players understand how you would build her and all that? And basically, that is giving you a visualization of things that you want to do with her and what items you want to have and all sorts of stuff, skill priority, etc. And of course, I myself, I don't really have as much time as I used to. Like when I had time back then, when I did Black Clover content, I was able to, consistently make sheets that can, help you understand how to build the character and what teams, synergies, etc. But luckily, in this community for the solo leveling Arise, I don't have to do that because someone has already done that. I did ask them in advance, and they said it was fine for me to use as long as I credited them. And here they are. It is from the Mass Doel Arm Genesis, so they've done many sheets like this for a lot of characters, not only AlicIA. So be sure to check them out on Twitter. They do have a bunch of them on their page, right? Yeah. So, anyways, we're just gonna go read it straight off from here, and then I'm gonna obviously as we go through it, I'm gonna give you my own iteration and my own opinions on it. But most of this is going to be very accurate onto how you would want to build her, right? From a theory crafting, right, perspective. Of course, in game might be different, but it's very unlikely that that'd be the case, especially considering there are people who need tests for the characters before their actual releases. So here's a note from Mos Doel, and it is AlicIA is slightly tactical for most hunters if you want to maximize her DPS. Her ultimate skill is kind of irrelevant since her core attack with 3 frost stack deal way more damage, making her DPS require A2 at least. So basically, just like I said in my previous video about her when we were going over what she does, you're basically not going to be focusing too much on her skills or her ultimate. Her main focus is going to be her core attack, just simply because when you build those frost stacks, you're going to get more damage increases on your actual core attack, and that's going to be the way to go, right? So just like I said previously, you're probably going to be wanting to use your Dragon Knight set and all that. And of course, getting advancement 2 on her is going to be very good to get your DPS output higher. Like, I want to say, I guess in a sense it is better. So basically, in a sense, if you want to use her as your main DPS, you're going to want to have at least advancement 2, because her first advancement gives her crit hit rate and crit hit damage, but that's not the important one. It's the second one. I believe that one is the one that gives her more frost stacks, which means you'll be having more consistency doing your core attacks, which is going to be her main damage output, right? All right, so let's get right into it and then actually talk about the, what they have up here on the visual, on the graphic visual. And we're just going to go up and start off with their skill level up priority. So the skill level up priority is going to be Winter Storm, then the core attack Frost Arrow. In my opinion, I'd probably do the core attack Frost Arrow, but I understand why they did the Winter Storm, because the Winter Storm is the one that you're probably frequently going to use before you actually get your core attack, right? If she's in the sub DPS role, there's only going to be those times that you get your core attack off is going to be once or twice, and then you're going to move into your next main DPS. If she is your main DPS, then I'd probably have core attack as the first, right? As the first skill level of priority. Then it would be Ice Needle. So this is just a damaging skill, nothing too crazy. It's not super important, but it's definitely better than the other skill skill advancements. Next up is your normal attack. So normal attacks don't really scale too high when you level them up. That's probably why it's all the way over here. But they are much better than her ultimate, which is going to be the very next up in line. Her ultimate doesn't do anything really special or crazy for her kit aside giving the frost stacks. That's really the only reason that you're using the ultimate, in my opinion, is just for the frost stacks. You want those frost stacks so you can do your core attack with higher damage. Next up is your QTE Internal Frost. Of course, you want to get your QTE, but your QTE is just so she could get that frost, and I guess I believe it also does freeze, but it's mainly for the frost. Next up, you have your support Ice Detonation. You don't really need to level this up. This is always like last priority for almost every character, simply due to the fact that it doesn't increase their effect, but more so they're just the damage modifiers from it. So it's not too important, because if you're using Sun Jin Woo, you're really using the supports for their actual support effects. Next up, you have your advancement and skill rotations. This is going to be for A0 to A1, right? Because, I mean, all it does is give you more crit rate and crit damage, so kind of like your positioning and how you use her skills, combos, and all that are going to be the same. So A1 gives you extra crit rate and crit damage when she's under the shield status. That's very easy to maintain, especially if you synergize her with Sayo, who also provides shield, right? So you use Sayo as your main DPS, AlicIA as your sub DPS. Her best position in advancement is support and sub DPS. Like I said previous video, she is more of a sub DPS support kind of character filling role, but you can make her work as a DPS character as well. She's going to be very good from here on out, just because she can give water damage increases. She can give shielding. I'm pretty sure she gives shielding from her frost shield thing. I don't remember what it was called exactly. The other stuff is like just little bonuses, but she can also increase water damage for the team, stuff like that. That's what makes her also a good support character. In the team formation, it's best to put her in the second slot middle due to her passive only gives 1 frost at A0 to A1, and she can only get 3 frost when she's on the second slot without wasting too much time on waiting cooldown. So basically what they mean is they just can't be in your first slot, because your first slot is what you start the stage off with, and you kind of want to have her in a different slot, so that way when you tag her in with her QTE, she gets 1 frost. You know, if you start off with her, then you're not going to get the frost stacks that you need, right? You don't want her to be in the first slot. Having her in the first slot means you miss out on that frost from the tagging in, right? From tagging in or QTE. So preferably you want to have her in position 2 or 3, doesn't matter whichever. You just need to make sure that you're switching into her second, right? But of course, having her on the middle slot is the easiest, because you know, if your controls on PC are labeled 1, 2, 3, then it's easier for you, right? If you're on mobile or whatever, just make sure she's in your second slot. It doesn't really matter, because I mean, you're gonna tap the screen and put her in, right? Then basically, like I said, QTE, go in. You're gonna get a frost because of QTE. And then you're going to use her skill 2, because it's very fast, and then her skill 1. And then that's going to give you 3 stacks of frost. You'll do your normal attacks, so that way you could get your core attack, and then you use your core attack. You're going to consume 3, because it consumes however many you have, up to a maximum of 3, and it does some extra damage based on how many stacks of frost it consumes. So the more stacks of frost that you consume, the more damage it does. So 3 is the maximum out of 5, because 5 is your maximum that you can hold, I'm pretty sure. And yeah, basically, you know, you want to consume 3 stacks at all times to get the maximum output damage. And boom, you're going to do big damage. And then you're going to repeat. You're going to cycle this again, right? In a QTE, skill 2, skill 1. That's going to give you 3 frost, normal attack, core attack. And then boom, you're going to consume those 3 frost once again. And then you'll use your ultimate. And then your ultimate will give you 5 frost stacks, which then you could just do your core attacks. Like, you could just go back into normal attacks. So you'll cycle right back here into normal attack, and then you get your core attack, right? Then boom, you'll hit him with your core attack. Boom, you just consume 3. You have 2. Now that you hit him with that core attack, you can either swap out and then go to your rotation again. So that way, when you're going into your rotation once again for your 3rd cycle, when you use these 3, you'll have 5 stacks again. Or if you don't want to tag her out, you could just go ahead and just start attacking normally, so that way you could get your core attack off right after your ultimate and your skills, right? So there's various ways of doing it. You just want to make sure that at all times you have at least 3 frost stacks, with your giving you the most amount of frost stacks, like the maximum cap, and then obviously your skills giving you 1 each. Now, of course, if you have A2, then it gives you even more, right? So A2 is really needed if players want to make her a DPS, since the frost stack you gain will only increase by 1. While A3 is not really necessary, it does increase AlicIA's damage to enemies under frozen stats by 30%, which is kind of big. So I did mention this before in my last video, is having A2 is going to be very nice for her, and that's probably what I'm going to be aiming for. If I were to play her, I don't really feeling her too much, but if I do decide to pull for her, it'd probably be A2, and that's just because it will give you an extra stack. So basically all your skills will give you 2 frost stacks instead of 1, which means you're going to be proccing your core attack a lot more than you do previously with just A0 or A1. So it's a really nice one. It's probably her best one in my opinion. Then you have your A3. So her A3, I don't know how I feel about this, simply due to the fact that you do more damage by 30% when they're frozen, right? But her Winter Storm, I believe it was only a 30% chance. I don't know if they're going to change it on release. They might change it. So if they do change it and they give a higher percentage, then I will change my mind on this. And of course, I would say, okay, maybe the 3rd dupe is actually worth it. But she doesn't have too many instances where she freezes. The main instance where she does freeze, like all the times, is usually when you use her QTE. So when you use her QTEs, you'll freeze them, and then obviously that 30% damage is big when you do tag her in from the freeze, right? Because then you'll be able to do insane amount of damage like very quickly, right? Now, if players have A2, A3, you can put AlicIA everywhere in team management since the rotation will be different. Yep. So basically, you won't have to worry about her stacks as much because she will be gaining a lot of stacks Frost just because she has A2. And then if the second slot is still the best due to her passive, yeah, of course, because naturally just being able to, go into her, it's good. So yeah. And with that, now she can be a long fielder DPS. Yeah, so she be very ranged, DPS, all that stuff, whatever. So this is going to be the rotation that you do for your cycle. I'm not going to go too deep into it because you kind of just have to kind of like feel for it on your situation in the fight. But this is going to be like the basis if you're landing everything perfectly, right? Overall, like I said, you just want to make sure that you're managing your stacks of frost and using her core attack when she has at least three stacks of frost, right? You always want to make sure you have three stacks of frost and then use your core attack and try not to overfill her frost. Because remember, her ultimate does give her 5, so that's going to be like that's max cap. So even if you have 3 frosts and you use her ultimate, you're going to have 5 no matter what. So just make sure you're using your core attack so that way you get rid of those 3 frosts that you have. So that way you can use your ultimate, so that way you can get back those 5 so you can start over the process, Now we're going to talk about artifacts. So artifacts, of course, the best set of artifacts for her is going to be the Dragon Knights, because the Dragon Knights increases her base attack damage and it also increases her core attack gauge and the core attack damage, right? You want this on her because her core attack is her main DPS output. I don't think it's definitely going to be the best for her regardless. No matter what, nobody can debate this. It is the best for her. But the second slot that I'd probably put her in for is most likely the crit set. There's no reason not to use the crit set. The crit set is good on everyone universally who wants to do any types of damage. So yeah. Now we're going to be talking about the accessories. Now for accessories, I feel like accessories are very, how do I put this? A lot of the accessories are very good and you're able to kind of swap between them very easily. A lot of them aren't very different. They're all kind of very good. So you kind of have a select few that are very good on multiple characters. You can use, like, for example, you have the Executioners, which is like the Behemoth set, and then you have like the Skeleton, which is also just as good as the Behemoth, except they just have 2 different conditions, right? So it kind of just depends. And then you have the Champion on field. With the Champion on field is really good, especially when she's fulfilling. She can either be your main DPS or your sub DPS. I believe Champion on field is probably one of her better ones to keep consistency on your damage. But remember, you do have to make sure that you have enough crit rate, so that way you're proccing this more frequently, so that way you have that attack bonus from the Champion on field. But Champion on field is by far probably her best. If you want to use her more of a support kind of character, you can use Aquamarine. It's not bad, but I would recommend using Champion of the Field, right? And then, of course, your next option would be Behemoth. Behemoth is good on so many characters. There's not a single character in this entire game that it is not good on, unless you're Min, right? Because, I mean, if you're Min, you don't really need to focus about your damage too much. But this is good on almost nearly everybody. The only issue is you have to make sure that the enemy's HP is below 70%, so that way you get a damage dealt increase, right? And then next up, you have the Concentration of Power, which is going to be the Viridescent set. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this in my opinion, because even though it increases your skill damage, the issue with this is the character that you're trying to play, which is AlicIA, right? You're trying to build up to that core attack. And if you are playing a content where it's very long and it's very drawn out, now you might say that that's not a lot of content, but even in cases where you're running it in short-term content, the problem is you're not really trying to focus too much on her skills anyways. Yeah, it does help her get her skills back quicker. It doesn't help her, but it also depreciates her value because the faster you're using skills, and also it also increases the MP consumption. The faster you're using your skills and the more MP consumption you're using, yes, you'll have more burst damage, but the problem is you'll run eventually out of MP, and once you run out of that mana, you're kind of screwed because how are you going to gain your frost stack so that way you can do your core attack damage? So in my opinion, I wouldn't recommend the Viridescent unless you don't have anything else. And the Concentration Power is probably the last thing I'd probably put on there, just because She does a good chunk of damage on her core attack, and the Viridescent, the concentration power just wastes too much mana, and it's just not very good for maintaining consistency, in my opinion. Someone could prove me wrong, and maybe someone's running it and they're doing perfectly well, but I probably wouldn't run it just because running out of mana is going to be like that's an execution for her. You know, you don't have any mana or MP, you're screwed. How are you going to do your skills? How are you going to get those stacks of frost? I don't know. I probably wouldn't put it, but it's listed as an alternative artifact combo, so I'm not really gonna like go ham on there or anything. I'm just like, this is just another option if you don't have it. It's probably one of the lower end options. There's also the skeleton. So you can use the skeleton. I don't remember what it's actually called, but I just call it the skeleton set. So basically, you can use the skeleton set. It is good on her. Don't get me wrong. It is good on her. The only issue is it takes time to set up, and you probably won't. You probably have to take some damage with AlicIA to get it started. And if you're running her in a team scenario, which most cases you will be, she's not going to be your first character. She's going to be your second character, right? So now your first character is going to be skipped because you're going to have to tag into her, so that way you can take damage. So the best way to actually maximize the skeleton is to have her in the first slot. It's kind of like maybe in long-term content you can do it, you can manage to pull it off because it's like, all right, well, it's going to be pretty long anyways, right? But I think the behemoth is much better because you don't have to worry too much about it. You don't have to get hit. But the skeleton can work, especially if you're using her with sail, especially with sail, because now you know you won't die because you'll have that consistency keeping her alive, you know, with the shields and stuff, and you could stay below threshold. But I wouldn't recommend it, so it's probably a good idea that they didn't put it on here, but you can use it. I wouldn't recommend it though. Basically, I kind of agree with majority of how they put up this sheet. This sheet is definitely well thought out. They thought about the character and how you do the rotations and stuff like that. So I have no issues with the list whatsoever. I do have a little bit of iterations that I'd probably change, like, you know, the Viridescent. I don't want that there as an alternative. I probably wouldn't use that because once you run out, you're kind of screwed. But I agree with the alternative for the crit rate. This is definitely her best set. This is definitely going to be her best, you know, accessory. These are definitely going to be your best options. This one as your second, and this one as your third, because when you're shielded, you get increased damage still, stuff like that. So it's like, it's good. And then of course, the armed war mage, whatever you want to call it. This is always good on everybody. It's like, it just gives you penetration. It's like you can't really complain about having penetration, right? Everything else, absolutely perfect. He nailed this spot on. He even mentioned out the notable things about the character and how you play her, and a requirement of A2 if you're trying to run her as main DPS. You can use her as main DPS without A2, but just keep in mind the frost stacks are going to be a little bit slow on getting, and you need to tag out and stuff like that to get more consistently, and using your ultimate to make sure you have those frosts and all that. I don't want to, you know, rant on about things we already covered and went over, but basically, this is going to be your how you build AlicIA Blanche video, credited by the Master Well on Genesis for providing this sheet to the community so everybody can, you know, learn and understand how to build the character. And yeah, that's about it. We've already talked long enough, and I'll see you guys when her banner drops, and maybe we'll do a video on her summons. I don't know. Maybe I might get her, but I don't think I'm going to go too far. I'm not really interested in the character herself. I just like Giga Chad's hand name. Mommies are good, but she ain't my mommy, I'll tell you that much. Anyways, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.